The clatter of a silver fork on the cheap tile floor echoed like a gunshot in the bustling diner. Denise flinched, her entire body tensing. "Clumsy," a voice boomed, slicing through the morning chatter. Ross, the manager, stood with his arms crossed, a cruel sneer twisting his lips. His eyes weren't on the fork. They were on the dirty, off-white bandage wrapped tightly around Denise's left wrist. "You can't even carry a single piece of cutlery, Denise. What good are you?" Denise ducked her head, her cheeks burning with a hot, familiar shame. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ross, it slipped." She tried to bend down, but a sharp, agonizing pain shot up her arm from her bandaged hand. She winced, biting her lip to stop a cry. She could only use her right hand, making the simple act of picking it up awkward and slow. The customers at table 4 looked away, embarrassed. All except one. In the corner booth, shielded by a wilting potted plant, Harold Dean didn't look away. He looked like 1,000 other men who passed through this diner. Faded flannel shirt, worn-out jeans, and hands that spoke of a life of work. He stirred his black coffee, the spoon making no sound against the ceramic mug. He had been here for 3 days, ordering the same thing: black coffee and a slice of toast, and he watched. He saw the way Ross never missed a chance to belittle Denise. He saw the way her eyes, shadowed with exhaustion and fear, darted to the manager's office every time the door creaked. And he saw the bandage. Ross stalked over to her. He didn't bend down. Instead, he planted his polished black shoe on the fork, pinning it to the floor. "Pick it up," he hissed, his voice low and menacing, meant only for her. "Use your good hand, girl." The word girl dripped with venom. Denise trembled. She knelt, the pressure on her knees painful, and fumbled for the fork with her right hand. Her left arm held protectively against her chest. The humiliation was a physical weight crushing her. Ross leaned in closer. "You are costing me money, Denise. You're slow. You're sloppy. You're a liability." He smiled, a sickening, thin-lipped expression. "And liabilities, they get cut." Harold watched the exchange. This was not just a manager berating an employee. This was torture. It was a predator playing with its food. He saw Denise finally retrieve the fork, her face pale, and hurry to the kitchen, disappearing behind the swinging doors. Ross watched her go, his eyes cold and satisfied, before turning his artificial smile back to the dining room. "Enjoy your meals, folks." Harold paid his bill in cash, leaving a generous tip for the other waitress. He walked out, but he didn't go far. He sat on a bench across the street, watching the diner's entrance. He had seen this pattern before. This level of cruelty wasn't random. It was strategic. Ross wasn't just a bully. He was hiding something. And Denise was his victim. The next day, Harold returned. Same booth, same coffee. This time the diner was less crowded. Ross was in his office, the blinds drawn. Denise was trying to carry a heavy tray of plates. She was using her right hand, balancing the tray precariously on her bandaged left forearm. Harold's stomach clenched. The tray was too heavy. It wobbled. A family at table 7 watched her, their eyes wide with worry. "Ma'am, let me help you," the father started to say, beginning to stand up. "Sit down." Ross roared, bursting from his office. He had seen the wobble. He marched toward Denise, his face purple with rage. "You useless." He didn't finish the sentence. He shoved the tray, not hard enough to spill it everywhere, but hard enough to make Denise cry out in pain as the weight jammed directly onto her injured wrist. "Ah!" She stumbled back, miraculously keeping the tray from falling, but tears streamed down her face. The pain was blinding. "Stop your whining," Ross snapped. "You drop that tray and the cost of every plate comes out of your paycheck. Understand me? You'll be working for free for a week." Denise just nodded, tears dripping off her chin. She slowly, painstakingly delivered the plates, her entire body shaking. Harold felt a cold, hard anger settle in his chest. This was beyond cruelty. This was calculated assault. He watched Ross stomp back into his office, slamming the door. The man was a monster, but monsters always had a reason. What was his? Harold Dean took a slow sip of his now cold coffee. He had built this franchise from a single hot dog stand 30 years ago. He had 54 Dean's diners across the state. He believed in good food, fair prices, and treating his staff like family. He'd received an anonymous tip about this location, not just about slipping profits. The books looked too perfect, which was always a red flag, but about a toxic environment. He had come in to see for himself. He expected to find a lazy manager or sloppy service. He did not expect to find this. This darkness Ross was skimming. Harold was almost certain of it. A manager with this much unchecked aggression, this need to dominate and control, was always hiding a deeper crime. Bullies used fear as a smokescreen, and Denise, with her broken hand and her suffocating silence, was at the center of it. Had Ross done that to her? The thought hit Harold like a physical blow. Had this man, an employee in his diner, physically assaulted this young woman? Why hadn't she gone to the police? He watched her as she refilled a salt shaker, her movements slow and pained. She was a black woman, hardworking, clearly in pain and utterly alone. Ross had isolated her. He had made her an it, a liability, an object to be abused. Harold's decision crystallized. He wasn't just here to fix a profit margin. He was here to deliver justice. Ross thought he was the king of this little kingdom. He had no idea he was being watched by the Emperor. Harold needed proof. He couldn't just fire him. Men like Ross were slippery. He would claim Denise was the thief. He would probably say she broke her hand falling down the stairs. He would use her. No, Harold had to be smarter. He had to find the real secret. The money. It was always about the money. The abuse was just the symptom. The theft was the disease. He finished his coffee and stood up. He walked past the counter, giving Denise a small, encouraging nod. She didn't meet his eyes, too beaten down to notice. He walked out of the diner and into the bright sunlight. He pulled out his phone. He wasn't calling the police, not yet. He was calling his head of security. "Mark," he said, his voice quiet but hard as steel. "I'm at the Springfield location. I have a situation. I need you to pull all the financials for this branch for the last 6 months. Not the reports Ross sent in. I need the raw data. And I need you to run a full background check on the night manager, Ross Coleman." He paused, looking back through the diner window. He saw Ross emerge from his office and shout at Denise again, pointing at a table that needed clearing. "And Mark," Harold added, "do it fast. I think we have a predator in our midst." The night it happened replayed in Denise's mind every time she tried to sleep. It was 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday. The diner had been slow and Ross had seemed even more agitated than usual, snapping at her for dropping a napkin. She had stayed late to deep clean the milkshake machine, her body aching with fatigue. She was the last one there, or so she thought. Ross had supposedly left an hour earlier. She was hauling the last bag of trash to the back door when she passed his office. The door was cracked open, a sliver of yellow light cutting through the dim diner. She heard his voice, not the booming public roar he used on the floor, but a low conspiratorial whisper. "Dead simple. I void the cash sales after the fact. The system shows a discrepancy. I log it as waitstaff error and I pin it all on the clumsy new girl. She's so scared of losing this job she'd apologize if I set her on fire." Denise froze. Her heart felt like it had stopped. Pin it on her? He was talking about her. He was stealing. All those times he'd accused her of miscounting change, of ringing in the wrong order. It was him. He was creating a paper trail to frame her. A cold dread, heavier than any tray, settled on her. She should have run. She should have backed away slowly, gone out the front door and never returned. But a primal, foolish burst of indignation seized her. He was ruining her. He was making her look like a thief. She pushed the door open. "Mr. Ross?" Ross whipped around from his computer, the phone still pressed to his ear. His eyes widened, first in shock, then in a cold reptilian fury. He hung up the phone. "What did you hear?" he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. I heard you, she stammered, her voice shaking. You're stealing. You're blaming me for it. Ross slowly stood up. The pleasant, smarmy manager mask melted away, revealing the monster beneath. You shouldn't have heard that, Denise. You're a stupid, stupid girl. I'm going to the police, she said, trying to sound brave, but it came out as a whimper. No, he said, walking around the desk. You're not, he lunged. Denise cried out and turned to run, but he was faster. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her back. She screamed, stumbling into the hallway. He was strong, his grip like a steel vise. You're going to keep your mouth shut, he snarled, backing her against the heavy steel prep counter. Let go of me. Let go, she shrieked, clawing at his hand with her free one. You're the thief, he shouted, his face inches from hers. Everyone knows it. You're clumsy, you're stupid, and you're a thief. He saw her left hand gripping the edge of the counter as she tried to brace herself. With a guttural roar, he grabbed her wrist. And he twisted. The snap of the bone was sickeningly loud. Denise's scream was primal, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony that was swallowed by the empty diner. She collapsed, cradling her arm, the world dissolving into a white-hot haze of pain. Listen to me, Ross panted, standing over her, his chest heaving. That's a warning. You tell anyone, not the other staff, not your friends, and especially not the police, and I will finish the job. I'll tell them you were stealing, that you attacked me and I defended myself. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, the respected manager, or you? He knelt, grabbing her chin, forcing her to look at him through her tears. I own you, Denise. You will come to work tomorrow. You will wear a bandage, and you will be silent. If you are not, I will have you arrested, and I will make sure you never work in this town again. Do you understand me? She could only sob, a broken, terrified sound. He had taken everything. Her job, her safety, her very voice. Back in his hotel room, miles away from that night of horror, Harold Dean stared at his laptop, his face carved from stone. Mark had sent the files, the raw data, and the truth was screaming from the screen. It was just as he suspected. Cash transactions voided by the dozen, all under Ross's manager-level override, all logged at the end of the night. All corresponding to shifts Denise had worked. The numbers were staggering. Ross had stolen nearly $15,000 in 6 months. Harold cross-referenced the dates. The thefts were bold, arrogant. But 3 weeks ago the pattern changed. The volume of voids dropped suddenly almost to zero for a few days before resuming. Harold pulled up the employee schedules. 3 weeks ago, Denise had missed 2 days of work. The days immediately following the night her hand was broken. A cold, lethal rage filled Harold's veins. This wasn't a simple case of fraud. This was brutality. Ross hadn't just discovered her. She had discovered him. He had broken her hand to silence her, to keep his petty, greasy scheme going. He had used assault as a tool of business. The cruelty he had witnessed, the public humiliation, the taunts about her clumsy hand. It was all a sick, twisted performance. He was re-traumatizing her every day, reminding her of his power, reinforcing her silence through fear. Harold looked at the name on the screen. Ross Coleman. A man who managed a small diner like a brutal dictator, all to skim a few $1,000s. A man who would permanently disable an innocent woman to protect his ego and his theft. Harold closed the laptop. The financial proof was ironclad. He could have Ross arrested for fraud tomorrow. But that wasn't enough. The man was an animal. He had to pay for what he did to Denise. The theft was one crime. The assault was another, and the assault would be his word against hers. Unless... Harold picked up his phone. Mark, he said, his voice a low growl. I need the security footage from inside the diner. Specifically the night of Tuesday the 4th. Check the feeds pointing toward the manager's office and the kitchen prep area. I have a feeling our Mr. Coleman was smart enough to delete it, but I want to know how he did it. Check the logs. I want to know if the system was tampered with. Harold listened, his jaw tightening. Corrupted? Of course it is. That's fine. It's confirmation enough for me. He hung up the phone. Firing Ross was too easy. Having him arrested for fraud was insufficient. No, this required something else. A public reckoning. Ross loved to humiliate Denise in front of an audience. It was only fitting that he be destroyed in the same way. The diner was his stage. Harold would make it his gallows. He had a plan. It was Friday, the lunch rush. The diner buzzed with the sound of chatter and sizzling burgers. Every table was full. Ross was in his element, prowling the floor like a ringmaster, his chest puffed out, soaking in the energy of the crowd. He loved a full house. It meant more cash in the register, and more people to witness his authority. Denise was moving through the chaos like a ghost. She was pale, the dark circles under her eyes stark against her skin. The bandage on her wrist was frayed and stained. She'd been making mistakes all morning, fumbling glasses, forgetting side orders. The constant grinding pain and the suffocating fear had worn her down to a raw nerve. Harold Dean sat in his corner booth. He wasn't the nondescript old man anymore. He wore a crisp, dark blue suit under his simple overcoat. His posture was straight. He was no longer observing. He was waiting. The moment came, as he knew it would. A customer at table 9 called Ross over. "Excuse me, manager? I ordered my burger with no onions. This is loaded with them." Ross's smile was instant and oily. "My deepest apologies, sir. We will get that fixed for you right away." He turned, his smile vanishing as his eyes locked onto Denise, who was passing by with a pot of coffee. He grabbed her by her good arm, his fingers digging in. "You table 9, you messed it up again." I wrote it down," Denise whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "I wrote no onions. Are you calling a customer a liar?" Ross's voice began to rise, drawing attention from the nearby tables. "You're incompetent. You can't even take a simple order. First you're dropping things, now you're deaf." "No, Mr. Ross, I promise I've had it," Ross shouted, flinging her arm away. He relished the sudden silence in the diner, the way every customer turned to look. This was his stage. "I have tolerated your whining, your clumsiness, your liability," he sneered, nodding at her bandaged hand. "But this diner has standards. We can't have thieves and incompetence on the floor." "Thieves?" Denise's voice was barely a breath. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. "That's right. I've been watching you."
All those cash drawer mistakes. It adds up, doesn't it, Denise?
"You thought you were so clever." He was going to fire her. He was going to frame her for his own crimes and throw her out. A final perfect act of cruelty. "You're fired, Denise. Get your things. In fact, don't, just get out. I'll be calling the police to have you arrested for theft." Denise stood frozen, the world tilting. This was it. He had won. He had destroyed her. That's enough. The voice was not loud, but it cut through the diner like a surgeon's scalpel. It was calm, clear, and radiating an authority that silenced everyone. Harold Dean stood up from his booth. He took off his overcoat, revealing the impeccable suit. He walked slowly, deliberately to the center of the room. Ross, momentarily stunned by the interruption, scowled. "Who in the hell do you think you are, old man? This is a private staff matter. Sit down and finish your coffee, or I'll have you thrown out for trespassing." "You won't be having anyone thrown out," Harold said, his eyes locking on Ross. The mild-mannered coffee drinker was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he could move mountains. "My name is Harold Dean." The name just hung there. Ross's brow furrowed. "I don't care if your name is—" He stopped. His mouth opened, then closed. "Dean. Dean's. As in Dean's Diners." The color drained from Ross's face, leaving a pasty gray sheen. He began to sweat. "That's right," Harold said, his voice resonating through the utterly silent room. The customers were watching, phones emerging, recording the entire confrontation. "I own this diner. I own all of them. And for the past week I've been sitting in that booth drinking your terrible coffee and watching you. I, Mr. Dean, I didn't recognize you," Ross stammered, his entire demeanor collapsing from predator to prey. I was handling a difficult employee. A thief. A thief? Harold's voice was dangerously quiet. That's fascinating, because I spent all last night with my auditors, going over your manager logs, the real ones, not the fabricated reports you've been sending to corporate. Harold took a step closer. Ross took an involuntary step back. Tell me, Ross, Harold said, his voice rising in power. How does $15,000 vanish in 6 months? How do dozens of cash sales get voided every single night under your manager code and then get logged as waitstaff errors? He pointed a finger not at Ross but at Denise, who was standing by the counter, her hand over her mouth, her body trembling. You've been using her, haven't you? Pinning your entire pathetic little scam on an innocent woman who is working herself to the bone just to make rent. No, that's a lie, Ross shrieked, his eyes darting to the exits. She's the one. I was building a case. And her hand, Ross. Harold's voice dropped to an icy growl. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. Did she break that herself too? Ross froze. This was the one thing he never expected. Or did that happen 3 weeks ago? Harold continued, relentless, advancing on him. On the night of Tuesday the 4th? The night she accidentally overheard you on the phone, bragging about your scam. The night you attacked her. The night you grabbed her wrist and you snapped it like a twig to keep her silent. Harold was now inches from Ross's face. And then you were so smart, weren't you? You went into the system and corrupted the security footage for the back hallway. But you're a sloppy criminal, Ross. You're not a manager. You're just a greedy, violent bully. And you're done. As if on cue, the diner's front bell jingled. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room. They spotted Harold and Ross. That's him, officers, Harold said, not taking his eyes off the whimpering manager. Ross Coleman. I'm having him arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and aggravated assault. Ross Coleman looked at the officers, at Harold, at the wall of customers recording his utter destruction. A pathetic little sound escaped his throat. It was over. The officers moved past the tables, pulling out their handcuffs. Sir, you need to come with us. Denise watched, tears streaming down her face, no longer from pain or fear, but from a profound, earth-shattering shock. The man in the suit, the quiet customer, was her savior. Justice, a thing she had given up on, had just walked in and ordered a cup of coffee. The click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest sound in the diner. Ross Coleman, who had been a lion only moments before, crumpled. He became a small, pathetic, sweating thing. No, please, he whimpered, looking not at the officers but at Harold. Mr. Dean, please. I have a family. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Harold Dean did not even look at him. He had turned his back on the manager, a final, complete dismissal. Get him out of my diner, he said, his voice flat and cold. Please, Ross shrieked as the officers began to pull him toward the door. Denise, tell them it wasn't like that. Denise just stared, her entire body shaking as the man who had tormented her, broken her, and threatened her into silence was dragged, weeping, past the tables. The front bell jingled and he was gone. A heavy silence descended. It lasted for 1 second, 2, and then a man at a table in the back began to clap. Just a slow, steady clap. An older woman near the front joined in. Within seconds, the entire diner erupted in applause. It wasn't just polite. It was thunderous. A wave of relief and vindication from every customer who had witnessed the public torture and the even more public justice. Harold raised his hand, and the room quieted. Though people still held their phones recording, he turned his full attention to Denise, and the hard, cold anger in his face melted away, replaced by a profound, fatherly kindness. She was still standing by the coffee pots, tears streaming down her face, her good hand pressed to her mouth as if to hold in the shock. What you all just witnessed, Harold said, his voice resonating with emotion, was the removal of a poison. This man, he was not a manager. He was a bully. He used his power to steal from this company and to brutalize a woman who did nothing but her job. He walked over to Denise, stopping a respectful few feet away. "Denise," he said, and his voice was so gentle it made her cry harder. "On behalf of Dean's Diners, I am profoundly and deeply sorry. We failed you. I failed you. I let a man like that wear our uniform and cause you this pain. No employee should ever endure what you have. I thought," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I thought he was going to fire me. I thought I was going to jail. He told me. He said they'd believe him." "He was wrong," Harold said firmly. "He will never tell anyone anything again except his cellmate. His word is worthless and yours is the only one that matters." He looked at her bandaged hand, his jaw tightening for a moment before softening again. "First things first. You are not working another second today. You are going to go to the best orthopedic specialist in this city. A car is waiting for you outside. My office has already made the appointment. The company will pay for every cent of your medical care, from this moment until you are fully healed, no matter what it costs." Denise looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Second," Harold continued, "my auditors have a precise number. Mr. Coleman stole $15,212 from this diner. He did so by framing you. That money in full will be in your bank account by tomorrow morning. Furthermore, my legal team has suggested a bonus for pain and suffering. An additional $15,000 will be deposited along with it." A collective gasp went through the diner. One of the other waitresses, who had been watching from the kitchen door, burst into tears of joy for her. Denise looked like she was going to collapse. "Sir, I can't." "You can and you will," Harold said. "It is not a gift, Denise. It is restitution. It is what you are owed." He paused, letting her absorb the reality. Her name was cleared. Her hand would be fixed. Her finances were secure. "But that just fixes the past," Harold said, a small smile touching his lips for the first time. "I'm more interested in the future. This diner. It's a good place, but it's been badly wounded. It needs a leader. Someone who knows the job from the ground up. Someone who understands what it means to work hard, to be honest, and to treat people with basic human dignity. It needs someone with integrity. It needs you." He didn't offer her a job. He offered her a new life. "I am promoting you, effective immediately, to floor supervisor. You will have a 50% raise in your pay. You will report directly to me, and you will help me hire a new general manager. You will help me rebuild this team. You will help me make this the best diner in the entire state." The dam of shock and fear that had held Denise together for 3 weeks finally broke. She let out a sob that was so full of pain, relief, and gratitude that it echoed in everyone's chest. "Yes," she cried, nodding. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Dean, thank you." "No," Harold said, handing her a clean pressed handkerchief from his suit pocket. "Thank you, Denise, for your courage. You are the heart of this diner." He turned to the customers. "Folks, I apologize again for the disturbance. All of your meals are on the house. We will be closing for the remainder of the day to clean house, but I promise you when we reopen tomorrow, it will be under new and much better management." People began to leave, many stopping by Denise's side to offer a kind word, a pat on the arm, a gesture of support. Harold waited until the diner was empty, the other staff quietly cleaning up, their faces full of hope. He led Denise to his corner booth and sat her down, pouring her a cup of fresh coffee. "Now," he said gently, sitting across from her, "the nightmare is over. Let's talk about your future." Denise looked at the man, her savior, and for the first time in weeks she took a breath that didn't hurt. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, and she was finally free. The world is full of bullies like Ross, those who prey on the silent and the vulnerable. They build their tiny, fragile kingdoms on the fear of others, but they always forget one thing: the truth has a way of coming to light. Justice may be slow and it may sometimes be quiet, but it is always watching. Today it just happened to be sitting in a corner booth drinking coffee. If this story touched your heart and restored your faith that good always wins, please help us by showing your support. Click like to show you stand with Denise. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories where karma is the final judge. And let us know in the comments below. What would you have done if you were Harold?